Welcome to Lesson 6. In this lesson, we will fill in the CTI gaps that we were left with. The goal of this lesson is to address the CTI gaps that remain from Lesson 5. We came out of the previous lesson with the following puzzle pieces. First, we have the 3 API calls. When the McAfee article mentioned the Impersonate namepipe client API call, it also said, since Impersonate namepipe client allows the calling thread to impersonate the security context of the client, in order to create the system service to connect to the namepipe, we'll need elevated privileges on the machine. While CTI doesn't provide details on this additional service or on the named pipe itself, the important thing to keep in mind is to generate the token manipulation telemetry. Now that we have a good notion of how the Impersonate namepipe client puzzle piece fits in, we'll start with 2 targets. An initial target where our emulated Shamoon runs under a non-elevated. We call logon user with the new credentials logon type, as Shamoon did to us. Next, we call Impersonate logged on user to apply the new logon sessions access token to the current. Using our cached domain admin credentials, we authenticate to the remote machine and obtain elevated access. Next, we use our elevated remote session to create a scheduled task on the remote target. We kick off our scheduled task, which runs our remote copy of Shamoon under an elevated domain admin. The first step in namepipe client impersonation is for us to create a named pipe to listen on. We then create a service that will connect to our named pipe as system and write some data to it. Once the system service has connected to and written to our pipe, we call Impersonate namepipe. We have now reached the end of Lesson 6. In this lesson, we address CTI gaps from lesson. For more information, please see the following references.